Okay, so there's maybe some language agnostic stuff we can do in terms of creating a database or a schema. So whether we're using whatever flavor of SQL we're using or whatever ORM we're using, we can start by basically doing the same thing. Start by visually describing the kind of database that we want to have. So we're going to do a simple example, and it's going to basically model employees and projects. So if you're at a company and you have a bunch of employees, then you have a bunch of projects, and employees can get assigned to projects. And so we'll kind of go through that first. So we have an employee. We'll just create all the entities first. ID, PK, int. And we're gonna have, we're gonna have a project. And then if we think about the relationship between an employee and a project, depending on the implementation, of course. So what kind of relationships could we potentially have?
You're probably going to go with a many-to-many.
Sorry?
We're probably going with many-to-many.
Yeah, I think many-to-many is probably, so we could also potentially do one-to-many. It would depend, of course, on how this business or whatever is set up. Maybe employee can only work on one project, or maybe one project at a time or something like that. Or we could have a setup where an employee could be working on multiple projects, and projects presumably could have more than one employee. So I think many-to-many is probably sensible. So in our actual database, we can't represent that relationship directly, so we need to create a join table. So you can have employee project, something like that. And we'll join this table. So we'll create two foreign keys. So employee ID, and that will have, and that will be FK and then this thing, forgot. Yeah, okay. And then we'll do the same thing here to connect project. So project ID, okay. All right, so we have employee, we have project, we have employee ID. So you can fill out, obviously we're not going to go too far, but it's basic stuff. So employee can have a name, let's say Mark or something like that. Project will also have a secret name, let's say. Okay. And we could also make this slightly more complicated. So let's say that we also want to store information about each employee, but let's say we kind of regard it as maybe supplemental. So the core of what the employee is in the system can be described by name and ID, but we also want, let's say, supplemental information. So in a web application context, this is often just called a profile. So we'll just call it profile. we'll have a profile and then ID. And then this could be something like years. Something like that. And then the you can have a so what would the relationship between an employee and a profile be?
Has a.
Yeah. So right, an employee has a profile. What's the, I guess, numerical relationship there?
It'd be 1-to-1, right?
Yeah, I think this is probably a case for a one-to-one relationship where you want an employee to have one profile and a profile to be associated with one employee. So do something like and then right, so you get some kind of system that looks like this. You could, of course, make this more complicated, but it's probably good for now. So this is just general. We've done this before lots of times with SQL. Now we're going to try to implement this into Python. So I'm going to go over here and create a new Django project. Let me zoom in. And of course, I'm going to have to create a virtual environment. So Python -m then then activate it. I'll install Django. And I'm just I'll stick with the default SQLite database now. So once I have Django installed, I can start a project, right? Start a project first and then apps. So Django admin, start project. Thing. And then I will cd into this file that just got created, and I will do Django admin start app. So the app that I want to create, let's say, is projects. All right. So we have our basic structure. We have the top level stuff, the settings. I should go ahead and add this app in here so that Django knows about it. So that will be projects. And then projects, we're only going to be concerned with the models for now. All right. So let's start building the models. Let me get an image of this. Okay, so we've got our profile employee, employee project, and project. So the documentation for all of this stuff, there's the model field reference. We've been looking at this before. There's also the database. So if you go to the database, there's all kinds of, yeah, all kinds of topics. So the documentation is very robust. So we can talk about all these different relationships. There's many to many, one to many, many to one. Okay. So let's just get started and then we'll use the documentation as we need. So we have an employee and a profile. So we can get started with that. So if I want to make a profile table, Jim, how can I get started with a profile table?
One second, I'm still getting my UI.
Sure.
set up.
Yeah, that's no problem. So let's see. John.
You do class profile,
Okay.
model.models in parentheses.
Okay. Models.model.
Then you do your fields. So
Okay.
who's employed or ID too, I guess. But
So do we need ID?
I forget. Does that do that automatically?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Well, so models dot, let's see, integer field. You can do integer. There's a few options we could have. We'll keep it simple, integer field. Okay. So now we have a table, profile table. And we have an employee. So let's see, Jeff.
We're gonna start the same way. Class,
Okay. Yep.
employee.
Okay. Models.model.
You make the IDs obviously already included, so we'll make the
Mhm.
name.
Okay.
Make that models dot and char field.
Okay. Are there any required?
I don't think for name, no. Probably when we get to profile ID, which I'm not sure how to do the linking in Django, so I'm gonna
Okay.
have to start searching documentation on the next one.
Yeah, that's fine. So but for the character field, is there any required keyword argument?
Oh, there is. 1 second. I have it in my notes.
That's fine. Yeah. So it's max. You have to tell it max
Oh,
length.
okay.
So
That's the version of the 255 or whatever. we were
yeah,
doing
that's not
in
something
SQL.
that you need to know off the top of your head. It's just how Django does it. So yeah, character
so this
field
one,
has a required.
Okay, and then for profile ID, I'm not sure how we do the
Yeah.
one-to-one linking.
Okay, so let's check out the documentation. Many to one, and then okay. So here's some documentation Django's giving us about one-to-one relationships. So here's an example. We have a place, and then we have a restaurant. So restaurant, is also a place or has a place. So we can
You can
see
copy and paste that in. Look over that.
just, yeah. So just looking at the example, we can see that Django supplies us a specific way of doing this, right? So we don't have to, this is very direct. So models.one-to-one field, and we pass in the name of the model, and then there's a couple other keyword arguments. So you can see that if we want to, there's also some examples of creating an instance. So creating a place, Again, this would be like our profile. So we're creating a place. And then when we create a restaurant, we can pass in that, the profile or the place. Okay, so we'll just try this out. Profile is models dot one-to-one field, and then we pass it in the class or the table that we're connecting. So profile, and then typically you're going to need to do on delete models dot cascade. So this would be the standard setup. Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. So we have this going. We could go ahead and try. I'm going to install Django extension. So pip install go. I'm going to add that just because that's how you do this particular extension. I'll add that to the apps. It's underscore. Save this. And then if I actually want to go into my database and start testing this, what do I have to do now? Because I have all my models written, let's just say, so far.
You don't really have to populate it. You have to go into the shell. So,
Okay.
to Django admin or manage, you have Python manage, and then shell.
Yeah, and
I
since
guess
I
you use
installed,
shell plus because you installed the extensions. So.
yeah, exactly. So I can do that, and then if I try to do, let's see, we have an error telling me that there's no such table. So I'm trying to write a query. Projects employee. So Django will take care of some naming conventions. So the name of the table should be projects underscore employee.
You still have to do that two-step migrate process.
Yes,
right?
exactly. So let's exit. So anytime you change your models, you're going to want to run a migration to keep your database in sync with what your code is. So Python manage.py make migrations. Okay. And we can see that in our apps migration folder, we get this initial migration, and we don't really need to worry about what's happening there. And then once we have that, so that gives us this intermediary that we could potentially modify if we needed to, but that's an intermediary. And then what we actually want to change our database, we have to take this other step. So Python manage.py migrate. And the first time we do it, we're going to get all of the default stuff. So there's a lot going on here. And once we have that, then we can go check out what's going on in our database. So let's do employee dot. And so obviously we don't get any results because we don't have anything in the database, but we're not getting an error. So this is a sensible query. So far it looks like this works. But how would we query for this employee's profile? Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and add. I'm going to add basically just a script file, because we're going to be making lots of changes. So I don't want to create a fixture file and then be constantly changing that. So I'm going to from projects. So far profile and employee. So if I want to create a row here, Jared, how do I create a new profile?
So whatever user one profile one equals profile dot.
So I want what I'm trying to do is create some data here. So my database right now is totally empty, and I want to start populating it. I want to create some profiles and some employees.
So then just put a name or
Okay.
for years employed for profile.
Yeah. Okay. So years. Oh, I misspelled employed. So I just changed my models. So what do I have to do?
The migrate.
Yeah. So Python manage.py migrations, and I get, yeah, sometimes you might get a message like this. Migrations are not always as simple as this. I'm sure you'll find. Okay. So I get this new migration, and you can see what's happening is that there's this built-in, Django has this built-in rename field method, and you pass in 3 things: the model name, the old name, and the new name. I could change this here if I wanted to, and then run the migration again, and that would change my database according to whatever I had customized here. I can do that. All right. So profile, years employed. And then, so does this mean that oh yeah, let's so does this mean that if I run this, I'm going to have a new profile in my database?
I think so.
Okay, so there's actually, there's a 2-step process. There are 2 ways of adding things. One is to use this create method, which will automatically add it. But here we're essentially creating the row or the instance, and then we need to save it. So we explicitly have to save it. And we could also do things like check, we could run clean or full clean or whatever. So we could do our validations here. We create the instance. Let's say we got this information ultimately from a form that a user submitted. We would want to sanitize or validate that data. So we might run clean or full clean or whatever we want to run. And then we have to save it. So profile1.save. All right. And then let's just create an employee. Employee, and we'll do name. And the profile, will be profile 1. I also need to save the employee. All right. So I'm gonna go load this in. So this is what So what I'm doing now is kind of ad hoc, just as we're developing. But once you actually start writing unit tests, there are other things you want to do. So we'll do Python manage.py shell, and then I'm just going to redirect this input data.py. Now I'm going to go into the shell. So I ran this script in the shell. So I'm going to go shell plus. And now if I go profile.objects.all, I should have one profile sitting here in the database. This is not a very helpful. This is not a very helpful representation, right? So how can I help myself out by giving myself a better representation? Cindy.
You can create a YAML file.
Okay. So why would we do that?
If you wanted to load the data better, is that
Yeah.
what you were asking?
Okay.
Yeah, instead of.
So that's not exactly what I was asking, but yes, you could. So if you wanted to create a fixture there, you could use JSON, which would be the kind of default format. You can also use YAML, which arguably is easier to use and read, but requires a dependency. So we could do that, but we're not really trying to create fixtures right now. What we're trying to do is we already have some data in our database, but when we look at it right here in the console,
you can print out, you can overwrite this string,
yeah,
and then print out that name, or you can print out name.
okay, yeah. So can you help me do that for profile
Sure.
and employee?
So def space underscore str.
Oops. Let's do that. Okay.
Self colon return
And then here, this is just kind of whatever we want to
Yeah.
do. Maybe we'll just do let's do profile. Okay, we do something like that, and I'm going to copy this. So this will be all right. So we can return whatever we find to be helpful. If we want to change this later, we can. So so I just changed my models.
Then you have to do migrate, manage.py migrate.
Yeah, so that's kind of a trick question. So we changed the models, but this doesn't have anything to do with our database. So this isn't going to change our database. We actually don't have to. There are a couple instances where you don't have to rerun migrations. We'll go back into the shell. And we will do let me get something that's a little bit more helpful. We could do whatever we want. Okay, and what about employee? So employee dot objects. What if I want to see the employee's profile? I want to see Bob's profile.
Add it to the string method in models.
Okay, yes, so we could do something like, yeah, we could do that. What if I want to, let's say I want to actually access a value here. So I could include it in the employee representation, like self.profile.
Wouldn't you have to join the tables somehow?
Yeah, yeah. So so we have this. So Django's doing some magic for us. So profile here is, you can think of it as an attribute of employee, of a given employee. So first off, we'll get the specific employee whose profile we're interested in. So we can do equals, and there are several things we could do to get this. I'm just gonna, since I know the ID, the primary key, I can do this. And this is Bob, this is the employee that we want. So we can see Bob's profile by doing bob.profile. So that's,
It's interesting that you use primary key instead of instead of ID.
yeah.
Yeah, is that
So it's basically the same thing. There's primary key is probably what you want to do. I forget exactly what the difference is, but primary key is the recommended one. We could check in the documentation, but there's a slight potential difference between ID and primary key. But ID should work in this context, since I'm not doing anything special. Okay, so let's exit out of here and let's finish making this model. So we have our profile and the employee. So now we have this many-to-many relationship. So again, there's a couple ways we could do this. We can create a join table. So if this were SQL, we would just start writing the project table and then the employee project table. Django, being an abstraction, makes things a little easier, maybe a little less transparent. We can look in the documentation. So there's not only a one-to-one field, but also a many-to-many. So you can do something similar here, where if you look at the example, we have a publication, and then we have an article, and this model is telling us that an article can belong to many publications, and a publication can have lots of articles. So we do an article, so you can actually, you add this many-to-many field. So just like the one, so we're gonna create, where's our thing? So we have an employee and we have a project. So let's make a project and then we can add a many-to-many field. All right, so Deb, can you help me write the project class?
So it'd be class,
Okay,
project,
all right,
would it be models, I guess in parentheses, models.model,
yep,
and then the colon afterward? And then would it be, let's see. I guess it has the ID. I'm not sure how to do the ID.
okay. So how do we do the ID for the profile and employee?
I guess for the employee, let's see, employee. I'm looking, okay, so I see name and profile.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be, I guess, so would it be, I see profile equals models, well, that's models dot 1-to-1, but
Yeah, so if we
Would it
look here at our, so this is our visual representation. So
Right.
it's good to have a visual representation so you can constantly refer back to it. So if we see that there are two fields that we want a project to have.
right.
One is ID and the other one is a secret name. So how do we handle ID?
I'm looking at, okay, if I look at the employee, I don't see an ID in the employee, in the class employee, I don't see it in employee. I'm sorry?
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess we would just do,
So Django by default will handle the ID for us. So
okay,
we don't
okay,
need to worry about it.
okay, so it'd be secret name
Okay,
equals models dot, I guess char field. Would it be
Yeah.
char field?
yeah, that works.
And then in parentheses, max length, max underscore length
Okay,
equals, I don't know, 255.
okay. All right. Okay, so now we have let's say we have the table or the class itself, but we need to establish the relationship between employee and a project, or employees and projects.
So we go to the, I guess the definition, the Django, I guess, documentation definition for many to many,
Uh-huh.
and add that information there. Would it be
Okay.
models.many to many?
Okay.
But I'm not sure exactly, I guess, would it be similar to that setup there? Something similar to that, publications equal models.many to many, similar to that after that headline?
Yeah, so publication, we have a publication class up here, and then the article, we want to have a many to many relationship between publications and articles. So within article, we give it a field called publications, usually a plural of the class that you want to connect. So in our case,
So it would be, so the class would be, so we're connecting profile.
so we want to connect employee.
Okay, employees. Okay, so it'd be
Okay.
employees equals, and then it would be, I think, what was it? Many to many, was it?
Yeah.
Many to many,
Models dot-
models, not many to many.
Okay, many to many.
And what was the rest of that? Many to many,
And then what is this in this example?
it would be employees. What it,
Yeah, so it's the other table or the other class that you want to connect this to. So in our case, employee.
employees, okay.
Okay. So now we have this project, and we have a many to many relationship. So this is actually all we have to do. So we don't have to explicitly create a join table. Django will implicitly do that for us. It's still going to have to create, there's still going to be a join table in the database, but our code here, our Django code, doesn't have to express that directly. So I'm going to go ahead and add this string method. Okay. So I've just changed my models. So what do I have to do now?
Run the 2 migration commands,
Okay. So Python manage.py.
make migrations.
Uh-huh. And it looks like that worked. So I'll run Python manage.py migrate. Okay, so no errors. It looks like I get this other migration file. So let's go ahead into the shell. So let's check. First, I'll check the employee. So okay, so I still have Bob is still there. And then the project. So let's do project dot dot all. So that's an empty query set. So if I want to create a new project, let's see. Adam, how can I create a new project?
From the shell, you can do the object name, so the project.create.
Okay. Project dot.
And then you could pass in the arguments, so secret name, whatever you want to call it, and then the association to the employee. So it'd be like employee, since it's linked to the class object itself, I guess would you pass like the primary key for Bob, or is that?
Yeah, I think you can pass the primary key. So let's do project name. Well, let's try doing it like this. So we might need to look at the documentation for adding many to many. So here we have this example, again, publication and article. So creating a bunch of publications here. And then an article. So notice when, in this example, when creating an article, there, at least in this example, there is no publication associated with it initially. And then when you want to do that, you actually will use this slightly different method called add. So for a one-to-one method, or sorry, a many-to-many relationship, it works a little bit differently. So again, there's more than one way to do this, but we'll do this first. So we'll create this project. So again, this create method is kind of a shortcut that combines creating the instance and then saving it. So let's take a look at all of our projects. So we have this showed up. So now we have a project, and what we want to do is now associate, this project with our employee. So to do that, if you look at the documentation, so a1.publications. So if we create an instance of article, we can access the publications directly. So article.publications, and then we can add what we want. I think we can use the primary key. So let me get this particular. So what we should start with is we want to grab this particular project. So if I do a project object at all, I'm going to get a query set, but I don't want a query set. I want one thing. So how can I get this project?
Is that still to me, or?
Sure, yeah.
So it'd be project.objects.get, and then it'd be primary key equals 1, since it's the first one we did. Or we could do secret name equals start travel.
Yeah. So a lot of things. In our case, this is kind of the simplest way to do it. We'll do that. Okay. So let me. I'll just save this to a variable. So, okay, so we have this. So now, again, looking at the documentation, we have a reference to our project. So, and then dot whatever. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what that is. So P1 dot employees. And we have this Django object, which basically means that we can run methods, so we can get all of the employees, right? This project doesn't have any employees right now, so it's an empty query set. We don't want to query, we want to add, we want to insert. So we have to use this method, add, and I believe this will work. Let's do employees.all. So again, this is a many-to-many relationship, so you'd have to look at the documentation. So we want to add one here, and then when we look for all of star travels employees, we get a query set. In this case, there's only one employee, so we just get one. But that is, that's basically it. There are some, there are some gotchas, and so as you're doing the exercises, you'll see that, so we do SQL and then Django like this many-to-one relationship. Sorry, many-to-many relationship. This is a little different. There are also ways. So for example, here we're accessing. We're getting the project and then seeing all the employees, but the reverse will also work. So if we want to get an employee one, let me see if I have okay, so let's get the employee. So we'll get Bob first. And if I want to see Bob's projects, so I could maybe try doing something like E1 dot project, like that. Okay, so that's not going to work. So this is a little bit weird. Again, this is Django, just like when it creates your tables for you, it has its own naming conventions and system. So when you're doing like a reverse lookup here, so if I'm just looking at this, right? So I want to see if I have a project and I want to see all the employees, it's just a property, right? It's very easy. So project.employees. But if I start from the employee and I want to get the projects, there's no, just looking at my code, there's no property that I can grab. So Django under the hood is going to create a way for us to do that, and it's going to be whatever the name is, by default, whatever the name is underscore set. So if I have a project, I can grab the employees, project.employees. But if I have an employee and I want a project, there's no direct way to do that. So it's project underscore set. And that's how I create it. Now that's what happens by default. You can actually override that, and you can create, you can pass in a keyword argument called a related name. So if you want to control how you handle like reverse lookup like this, then you can give it a related name, something sensible like projects. And that way, instead of doing employee.project underscore set, you would just do employee projects. So it's a bit strange, but that's how Django does it. So you should have the basic conceptual framework from our work with SQL, but there are definitely some funny things that Django does. So one other, I don't want to, you'll see this as you do the exercise, but one other thing I want to mention that's a bit of a gotcha is that this many-to-many field will kind of work by default if this join table doesn't have any additional data, right? So as it is, we just have an employee and a project, and this employee project doesn't really have its own data, right? It just has the employee ID and the project ID. But if we wanted this employee project to contain other information, then we would need to explicitly create a join table in Django. So this is like the quick and easy way to do it if your join table doesn't have any additional data. Okay. So for the challenges, there are 4 example applications. Please let me know. So I updated. It should work better, more consistently. If it doesn't, please let me know. But yeah, so basically going through what I just did, but with 4 examples, some of them a little bit more complicated perhaps, but just give it a try. Try to at least get one. So if you can get the IMDb going, then that's good. You have the idea. The other ones are more complicated, so feel free to do those as well. And then